We're going to do that. We're going to have a talk for roughly 10 minutes and then do a Q&A discussion. So everyone who came this morning, you're going to have the pleasure of picking the brains of some of the folks who have seen a lot of programs develop, as well as been a part of a lot of resources and programs. And most of them, if not all of them, have actually started their own companies and been through the process as well. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Lee. I'd like to welcome you up, and you can introduce everyone and take it over from here.
Cool. Thanks, Jordan.
Let's give him a warm welcome.
All right. I want to introduce some cool folks. When they get up here, they'll take about a minute or so and kind of give their own introduction. But first, John Chamberlain. John is a member of the Arkansas Academy of Computing. It's almost like prom or something. You're getting introduced as you walk in. But John and James were the co-founders of Arkansas Systems. Elise Stroud. Elise is the founder of Merger Match, one of the startups to go through our pre-accelerator class last year and one of our mentors as well. Scott Schelleberger. Scott just left his corporate day job that he was in for 2 or 3 years after selling it to a big corporation, selling the startup. And James Hendren. Cool. All right, at least you've got the mic. Why don't you give us a minute or so on what Merger Match is?
So good morning. First of all, I'm a little hearing challenged today, so if I'm too loud or too soft, I need you to give me some feedback on that. Merger Match was designed to reduce the risk of mergers and acquisitions. My partner and I had implemented a number of those over the last 30 years, and we saw a real problem in that space. So we designed a model that allows companies to do a gap analysis between the two and really see where they fit together, kind of like marriage counseling for corporations.
I'm Scott Schelleberger, recently retired from my corporate job. I was one of the owners of a small TPA called Novasys Health. We managed and processed about $40 million worth of medical claims a month with systems that my staff wrote. I'm the VP of IT, all open source systems. We wrote them for about $50,000, which isn't bad for managing that many claims a month. We sold to a big Fortune 500 company about 3 years ago, and now I'm semi-retired, taking care of my family and looking for the next thing to work on. So,
James Hendren, and John Chamberlain was actually the founder, and I came shortly thereafter. After we sold the company, though, I've worked with dozens of startups, helping a bunch of people start companies and serve on a whole bunch of those boards, and been very actively involved in Accelerate Arkansas, helping found that. And we have rewritten and changed and created a whole bunch of the incentives and support organizations for entrepreneurs around Arkansas.
Hey, I'm John Chamberlain. I've been doing technical things in Arkansas for almost 50 years. Learned Fortran a little over 50 years ago, and that's sort of been the story. I'm maybe one of the first people that quit a job at a startup in Arkansas to start up another company. I left Systematics after 3 years and started what became Arkansas Systems. And maybe drifting into the entrepreneurial advice, one of the things I learned in the first couple of years was that I was not a good CEO, which is where James came in. And so 2 of my smart things, one is letting him come into the company, and I guess actually convincing him to pay to get into the company. That was a pretty good deal. James is not the easiest person to get to write checks. And then after that to turn over the job of running the place to him.
All right, cool. So I'm going to ask them some questions. You all think of some questions. We're going to open it up in a couple of minutes. So Elise, let me pivot to you. I love asking you this question. What's it like to experience a pivot in your business model?
It's humbling. A lot of you probably heard this story, but we started out our project thinking that we were going to do this great, wonderful service for startups. And James and others kept telling us startups don't have any money. You need to find a different customer. And so one day somebody finally hit us in the head with that message enough that we understood it and convinced us that we should go after the mergers and acquisitions market with our project because they actually had money. So it was a real, little light bulb going off kind of moment.
But it happened early on, so that's good.
Thank goodness for that.
And Scott, I know you're still drinking your coffee, but talk to us about what lean methodology really means.
Well, the thing that I like most about the lean methodology is that you find your customer's pain point first, or the problem first, before you build anything. And there's that whole interviewing process. So you interview for the problem. So if everybody knows anything about Lean Canvas, you talk to your customers, or who you think your customers are. That's pretty important. And then determine that you actually have a problem. Then after you determine you have a problem, then you need to determine you actually have a solution people will pay for. All of that happens before you even create a project or product. So I think that's pretty important, because I've seen too many people throw $50,000 here to build a great social media site for dog owners, or things that if they would have asked just 5 or 10 people, they wouldn't have wasted their money. So
how do you do that in a big corporation? So when you did your introduction, you talked about spending $50,000 on open source software to process $40 million worth of claims.
That was, well, there was nothing. That wasn't. We knew what the problem was. The problem was we needed to process a lot of claims automatically, and we had no money. So that was the.
You were forced to be lean then.
Yes, we
forced to bootstrap.
Forced to be lean and forced to bootstrap. So a little bit different. In a big corporation, what you see now trending is all these Fortune 500 companies are being told they're not lean, they're not innovative. So they're starting to lease space in places like this, or what will be the tech park. I was in St. Louis at a place called the Cortex. If anybody knows what that is, St. Louis has they did a tech park a little bit different than we're doing ours. They eminent domained a huge section of the city and have all these buildings that they're renovating, building new buildings. But Boeing's down there, IKEA. There's probably, I would say there's 200 startups in that space as well. So big companies, they're leasing that space because they want to be close to the innovators, which are the people starting their own businesses.
Cool. Let me ask you this too, Scott. When you did the first company 3 or so years ago, you've gone through the process once. As you look to start your next idea, what do you learn from that? How do you do the next startup differently?
Well, you already talked about one thing. Don't be afraid to pivot. You may think your idea is great, but you got to get a lot of people to think your idea is great. So don't be afraid to change. Don't fall in love with your idea. Don't be afraid to tell people your idea. A lot of people will say, I've got this great idea, but I can't tell you anything. Well, the more people that know about it, the more opinions you have, is the better validation. If you see someone already in that market, that's validation as well. If you have an idea and you don't see anybody in the market, that's probably not that may lean you towards it not be a good idea. So think about that.
Let me follow up on that. That concept of I've got this great idea, but I can't tell anybody about it is really not healthy. There may be 57 other people with that idea. locally. And one, you need to know that. And as you start telling people about it, they're going to give you several pieces of information. One is good feedback about how you might do that better. Good feedback about, I wouldn't buy that if you gave it to me. Good feedback about, hey, here's all these competitors, check them out. Can you be better than they are? Or good feedback about, gosh, I'd love to have that. Can I put a deposit down on it? Or, gee, here's a partner that could really help you with that. They're really looking for that solution, and they might be really good partner with you. So go out there and talk about their idea, and they may also be leading you towards a bunch of customers. So all feedback is helpful, whether it helps you decide to do something else or it helps you improve your idea.
So let's say somebody's got an idea, they're going through the process, and they decide they want to raise some capital. What are the 3 or 4 things they really need to focus on before they go pitch to investors? That's open to anybody that wants to take it.
3 or 4 things. I mean, it's pretty variable depending on what kind of company you are. But you end up, if you're going to ask for money, you've got to convince people, one, that you're worth investing in, that you have some drive and passion and unique set of things that are going to help you do the thing you're talking to them about. And you have to have some clear way that you can make money at it, and know what you're asking for, how much money you need to do what. And it's amazing to me, sitting on an investment committee, how many people come and talk, and they talk about one part of that, but they don't knit it all together. They brag for 10, 20 minutes on how good they are, but nothing on the business. Or they show you lots of numbers on the business, but still can't convince you that it's going to work.
Yeah, and I think a couple other things that go with that are, if it's something that you're going to be selling a lot of volume on, whether it's downloads on an app or widgets or whatever, you've got to be able to have it demonstrate that you're going to sell a bunch of them for a low price. Can you deliver it for less than that low price? So that cost per unit, plus being able to cover all your overhead, is critical. If that story's not real clear, the investor isn't going to invest. And I think the other one, not only do you have to demonstrate your passion, you got to demonstrate that you've got either the entire team that it takes it to do it. Nobody can do everything, unless you're a lifestyle business and you and your family or your friends are going to run it and just kind of live off of it, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. But unless you're that, it takes a team to grow a business to big volume, and you need a cross-functional team. You need the developers, whether that's an employee or contractors or whatever. You need how's sales going to happen, how's admin going to happen, how's governance, how's legal, how's all of those pieces going to happen. So they're going to look at the team. You don't have to have all the team in place on the front end, but recognizing that you're going to need the team and how you're going to get there and get that team, I think the team is a real critical piece of what an investor's looking at.
From the entrepreneur's point of view, what do you feel like is the exciting opportunity in Central Arkansas for an entrepreneur, and what do you feel like the community needs to work on and improve?
Well, I'll tackle that one. We've got some really great programs, both private, like the Venture Center, and public investment tax credits and all kinds of various programs like that. None of the state programs are funded well enough. In fact, some of the funding has been decreasing over the last few legislative cycles. So encouraging your legislators to get those programs back up and funded a little bit more makes a big difference. When you go to get investment tax credits, for example, which most investors in Arkansas are looking for. And they say, oh, we've reached the cap, or they don't tell you that, but it gets harder and harder to get approved because they know they're reaching the cap, and they're finding other excuses not to approve you. Means your investors are going, well, if I can't get my tax credit on that money, I'll invest in somebody that has it, or
James,
come talk next year.
Explain briefly what you mean by the tax credit.
Okay, one of the programs in the state is if you're a startup company and you're somewhat technology oriented, you can go to the state and you can apply and get approved for investment tax credits. That means the investor that invests in your company gets a 33% credit for the money that they put in that they can use against their taxes. And even better that we put in that law is that credit, if you can't use it against your taxes, it can be used only against half of your state taxes each year, but you can carry it forward for 9 years. So if you can't use that credit, you can sell it. So we added that piece to the program, which means you can cash it out. So the investor gets a discount off of their investment on the front end, and that program is extremely valuable. When we put Fund for Arkansas's Future together, if we hadn't had the tax credits, that fund, the first angel fund in Arkansas, would not have happened. That was a real key selling piece. So raising the cap on that is one very important piece that needs to happen.
So then where would one go to apply?
And if y'all would repeat the question in the mic since we're videotaping.
The question is, where do you go to apply for those? The AEDC, Arkansas Economic Development Commission, down on Capitol Avenue. Anybody remember the address? 500 block, I think. AEDC.
And
You can
James-
also set up a mentor session with one of these folks and talk about it in detail. Yeah.
And James, this will segue into another missing piece, that those require technology, not just I'm going to open a pizza place. Right. So e-commerce often qualifies. Something that's based on research would very solidly qualify. And so I have a question. Is anybody here a professor, a researcher? Anybody here a student at a university? So we've got a gap there, because ideally you get a lot of different kinds of problems that you're trying to solve, and you have a lot of different tools to try and solve those. And one of the tools is research, and commercializing research to make something better to solve this problem that we've talked about. And we don't have enough of that yet. But if you go way back, if you go back to like, why is the chicken business big in Arkansas? Two things is that the university system was good in genetics, and you get poultry genetics, very strong poultry science department, and you get nutrition. And in my lifetime, it's gone from taking 4 pounds of feed to get a pound of chicken to less than 2. So that's a couple pieces of university research that have rolled into the poultry industry. And every other opportunity that there is, there may be some opportunity to use research for that. And we don't have enough cross networking between the entrepreneurial community and the research community, although people are working on it.
I think another piece that's missing is we need a really strong in Arkansas-based venture fund. So that's the level of investing in a company after you've kind of gotten to the level that it's higher than the angels will fund. We've got a couple of little pieces that kind of claim their venture capital funds, but they really don't invest in Arkansas. And most of the venture capital that's that's when a company's ready to get the $5 million, the $10 million, the $40 million kind of investment. Most of that money that's come, well, essentially all of it's come from out of state, and the out of state firms just don't tend to look that hard in the state. So getting one of those organizers, some groups, I'm involved in one of them that's trying to get one of those up and going, but boy, to go raise, several $100 million to put in a fund to invest in those kind of companies is not kind of natural to folks and institutions in the state. But that's another one of our missing pieces. We're working on that, but not done yet.
Cool. All right. Anybody else have some questions out here?
Can you take a tax credit if it's your own money, you're investing in your own company?
They're looking for what they're really looking for is, I want you to prove some validation that you've got some worth. Because you think you got a great idea, that's not much validation. So they're looking for outside money. They assume you already put all the money in there you could afford to put in. So, can you get enough validation to get other folks to invest in you to qualify for the tax credit for the recording?
As a female, were you able to get any grants or any help from some I've heard about government grants for women who want to start businesses? No offense, guys, but just asking.
Please be sure
Wouldn't that be lovely? Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay. She asked about government grants for women, right? We haven't gone after any of those. My co-founder and I both had pretty lucrative consulting companies. And so we've been self-funding this and haven't gone after any extra funding. We haven't even asked for any investment money, although that may be a mistake. We're thinking about that. But there is money out there, I hear, I just haven't explored it.
I think the other thing that you'll find, though, is all of the state programs and the investment groups, the private investment groups are, they love to find a good minority-owned or women-owned business, and they're sensitive to that. They'd love to look at it. So I don't think there's a discrimination issue there. So
To piggyback on that question, how can an entrepreneur de-risk their startup before they go pitch to investors, so they have the best meeting possible? Yeah.
de-risk was the question.
Yeah.
Get all those questions answered we threw out. There's, if you've got a pilot of your project, if you've asked the potential customers, if you've piloted your solution with some real customers, that's pretty quick de-risking.
I was looking for a pre-accelerator class and mentorship, but
Absolutely.
I'm going to chime in on that one. I think the biggest thing that you can do to de-risk your idea is get some serious mentorship from somebody who's done startups before, and make sure you're getting out of your own head. Like we talked previously about being enamored with your own idea, and that can be a huge time waster. So you need to de-risk it for yourself. You need to spend some time with mentorship, go to classes, do whatever you need to do to validate that your idea is actually worth your own time, which happens to be your most valuable resource. Time that you spend wasting on a bad idea is lost opportunity that you could have spent investing in a better idea.
To piggyback on that, a pre-accelerator program that really helps you go through all those decisions and look at all of the pieces. It's just as good a solution at the end of that to decide, I didn't have a good idea, I need to go find a better one. You just may have saved a few years of your life swimming upstream on something that isn't going to work.
So Bridget and I went to the first pre-accelerator class, and we'd started companies before. This not our first trip to the rodeo. But we decided to go to this class and see if we couldn't learn how to do this thing better. And it was an extremely good use of our time. It made us focus on issues in a way that we probably wouldn't have otherwise. So I do think sitting down in a pre-accelerator class is a good use of your time. Even if you don't do the idea that you walked in the door with. We had one of our classmates spent the whole entire 14 weeks working on an idea, and what they ended up proving to themselves was that the idea would not work. And that's actually what they presented on graduation night was their pitch. And at the end of it, they said, we learned this wouldn't work, and so we're gonna go work on something else.
I've got a question. If you're an entrepreneur who is fortunate enough to be in the middle of a conversation with investors, how do you look at that opportunity sober-mindedly, and what kind of red flags should you be looking for? Okay, if you're an entrepreneur who's fortunate enough to be having a conversation with an investor, how do you look at that opportunity sober-mindedly, and what kind of red flags should you be looking for, if any?
I'll probably say something and then you'll think of a better answer, but that's great. Depends on the setting that you're in. If you have just a short amount of time to try to convince somebody of what you're doing, the value of it, that they should look at it, you need to set that as the goal. That's the elevator pitch of the idea. You don't want to come up and, you know, put a fire hose down somebody's throat to try and tell them everything you thought of, everything you've known. You need to have the succinct way of doing it, and you need to sound confident. And you also need to listen. If you get a reaction to that, you know, take that reaction away and strengthen your next approach to someone.
And if you're like talking to one of the angel groups, they have a process that they go through. Fund for Arkansas's Future, the first true angel fund in Arkansas that we organized. We have a very specific process. All kinds of folks can refer you to them, and you want to, you know, meet them at a catalyst session, a mixer session, or something like that, and get introduced. And then we have a one paid executive director that's the gatekeeper, and get introduced to him. He's going to ask you for some background information and interview you a little bit. And then if he thinks it's something that the fund might be interested in, he's going to schedule you into a very formal presentation in front of the investment committee, which are all investors in the fund, volunteer members that make the decision on investments. And that's a formal presentation that you're going to get 20 or 30 minutes to give a PowerPoint formal presentation. And you're going to want to practice that a whole lot, get a bunch of mentors to look at that and give you hints on it, and be ready to answer all the kind of questions that we're talking about that investors are looking for. So there's everything from the run into somebody at a mixer and give them the elevator pitch, that all you're trying to do is find out, one, are they interested, and two, if they are, can I schedule some time to really talk about it, to the very formal presentation to something like an angel group, that there's going to be some steps to go through to get to that. Does that answer your question?
No offense, no.
Oh, okay. Ask it again.
In a different way. What are the signs that an investor is or is not a good fit for your company?
Oh, okay. Well, your ideal investor is somebody that really understands you and your product and the industry, and that you feel some chemistry with, and obviously can put in more than a nickel. So I think you're measuring those pieces. So they need to be enthusiastic, and ideally they're going to supply some some other help other than just money. Sometimes you take money from somebody that can't supply the additional help, but the chemistry's there and they're excited about what you're doing and they aren't going to be a distraction. So that's just kind of a personal measurement, but spend enough time with them to realize whether the relationship is going to be some chemistry. And it's okay to, ask, other folks that know them or that they've invested in, how that relationship goes. Anybody that's done a lot of investments have good relationships and some that turn sour. So just one bad or one fabulously great discussion of an investor, try another one and see if you can find one that's on the other side and kind of even it out. Did that help any? Okay.
We have time for just one more, if anyone has any. If not, okay.
Well, there's the question was, what does investor get out of that? Typically, they're looking for equity, which is ownership. They're putting in very risky money, very high likelihood that they're going to get nothing back. So they want to have a good upside to go on that. And so if the company's successful, I want to own a piece of it. So that's eventually becomes percentage of profits. It's a percentage of what you sell the company for. And typically, be aware, most investors are looking for an exit some number of years out, 5, 6, 7 years out, where they're getting taken out for a significant multiple of the money they put in, because they do 10 deals and 7 or 8 of them go in the tank and they get nothing. And overall, they need a decent return over the whole amount. So they're looking for, 2 or 3 home runs in there that are going to cover all the losses on everything else they put money in. That help?
Awesome. Thank you all so much for being on the panel. Let's give them a round of applause. All of these folks are going to hang out for a few minutes before we wrap up, I think, and they're all mentors here at the Venture Center. So you've got access to folks like these and many, many more that have waded through the deep weeds before and have come out the other side. Hey, one thing I do want to ask is that when we wrap up Million Cups every week, if you all would be somewhat considerable of the other folks that work in the space, as far as like how loud we talk. There's a lot going on Wednesdays, and just be mindful that this is a place of work. So cool. All right, thanks.
Cool. Awesome. Do you want to talk about programs real quick? Do a run through of what's coming up.
Okay, so next Tuesday, 6 o'clock, we have our Catalyst Mixer, which is a lot of fun. There's a screaming goat and lots of meeting different people. Basically, you have an opportunity to come up here and pitch why you're awesome, why your company's awesome, why we should care. And then after that, we have a little Q&A session with, it's going to be a surprise person. It's kind of a surprise person every time for you guys. But we do a little Q&A with an industry expert and or a local entrepreneur here in Little Rock. Varies from time to time. And after that, we have a 3-minute speed mixer. So you have an opportunity, you line up in a line. That's what these lines are for over here. And every 3 minutes, the goat screams at you and you move to the next person. So you really have an opportunity to meet a whole lot of people, make a lot of connections. We've had a bunch of startups that have hired people directly from the member mixer. We've had people who found co-founders for their companies, and we have people who just have a really good time coming and meeting people that they would not have otherwise met. Then on the 22nd of September, do you guys know Atari? You know Atari? Yes, no, maybe so. Centipede? Do we know Centipede? Okay, well, the lady who created Centipede, she coded it. The first girl coder ever to be hired by Atari, wrote Centipede, lives here in Little Rock, and is going to come and tell us what it was like to be on the cutting edge of programming in the country, much less to be back here. So that's really going to be fun. We're going to have a big Atari game set up on the screen, and she's going to talk, and it's going to be really great. And then the last thing, I'm going really fast, The last thing is Jolt. Jolt is going to be a 24-hour hackathon. It's a cybersecurity hackathon. It's going to be set up like Jeopardy. So the way it works is the team's going to come up and say, I want C vulnerabilities for 300. And then they're going to flip over a card. There's going to be a puzzle. They're going to solve that puzzle. And then they'll move on to the next thing. Teams are going to be randomly assigned based on a fancy little algorithm that was written by our hacker in residence here. And then also it's going to be 24 hours. So it's going to start at noon on Saturday, go all the way to noon on Sunday. So by all means, come hang out with me. Bring your blankie, bring your caffeine, and hack some stuff, right? So, okay.
Awesome. And then, okay, real quick, I want to give opportunity for those of you who may have other community events going up. I know you have a few if you want to talk about those. Okay, yeah. And then does anybody else have any?
Hey everybody, so Legends of Arkansas is coming up September 19th. It is an all Arkansas music and art festival in the Riverfront Park. It is free admission, but we do have VIP packages for sale on our website, which is legendsofarkansas.com. Last night we released finally we're going to do a pitch competition thanks to our friends here at the Venture Center and the Chamber of Commerce and the Innovation Hub. So with this pitch competition, it's free to enter. It's for anyone that has any kind of idea. It's going to be a relaxed, informal kind of pitch competition because we want people, beginners, to get up and feel comfortable in doing a 3-minute pitch. So it's free entry, 3-minute pitch, and we're going to have a pitch training here at the Venture Center on September 16th from 11 to 1. And then the actual competition is at the Innovation Hub from 6 to 9 that Friday, the 18th. 3 winners will get up on the main stage at Legends of Arkansas and win really, really cool prizes from our friends here at the Venture Center. Yeah, so there you go.
All right. And then the last few community events coming up, we have Tech Fest, which is October 16th. And then actually before that is the Made by Few conference, which is for kind of makers of the web. They have some great speakers coming in from all the countries. So does Tech Fest as well. And Made by Few is October 1st through the 3rd. Both are amazing conferences and kind of centerpieces of the tech community in Arkansas. So go online and you can Google those and find out more information. And then lastly, next week for 1 Million Cups, we are having a startup who has actually won I think it was the Pitch and Pints, or they won part of one of the prizes at Pitch and Pint. And he's also been a winner in a startup weekend and is planning to launch a new app in the next coming months. The company's called Raft Up. So if you guys know anyone in the boating community, or if you like boating, try and bring people out because they've got a really cool concept and we want to help them launch here in the state. And
I've got 2 things.
Yep.
One of them will depend on getting a screen up. But when I got introduced, Lee mentioned the Arkansas Academy of Computing, which is people that have got 25 years or more in the field of computing in Arkansas and have been selected because they contributed something. Academy of Computing has an event on the 10th of October, which will be out at the EIT building at UALR. It'll be an open session with some entrepreneurs talking. I think the Smileys, 2-generational thing. There'll be an entrepreneurship panel. There'll be some research presentations and a tour of some facilities at UALR. So that's coming up. You run into more Academy of Computing people than you might think. There's 3 of us in the panel this morning. And 2 of the speakers that have spoken or will be speaking this month at Venture Center events are members. Donna Bailey, the Atari programmer, is one of those. Sitting here a month or so ago, I noticed there were an awful lot of technology events in October, and that we often stand up and say, well, things aren't quite as developed in Arkansas as they might be. And that's probably true. We've got new suggestions, but there's 50 years or more of technology heritage in Arkansas. So I decided to put a name to it. This upcoming month, next month, is Techtober. There's a list that Lee is maintaining of events there, and they range from the first of the month to on into November, because it didn't all fit in one month. But there's going to be a little media package, then we could use help with getting the word out that all the wonderful things that everybody else is doing sort of fit together under this idea of Techtober. If we were all about apples, we'd have an Apple Festival. We're really all about technology, so we'll have a Techtober.
And then, okay, so the last thing, so we've talked about all these events. Our speaker last week actually presented on how and he's standing right there, Luke Irvin, presented on an app that they've developed for events called Attendant, and you can go in the iOS app store right now and download that. So it might be a good idea to try that out and start checking out or plugging in events through that way. So I think that was a good plug. All right, well, thank you all for coming this week, and got coffee left over, hang out for a little bit. It's Co-working Wednesday if you want to find some space here to work. And like I said, hope to see you guys next week with Raft Up, and then we've got several other awesome presenters in the pipeline coming down the road. And I'll see you guys next week.